how are they held accountable by the World Tribunal? What is the level of accountability to them that all the other countries can come out and say, listen, you cost us a lot of money? Is there any way of holding them responsible for waiting 6 weeks?
Well, there's a number of different ways to do that. There are some cases in U.S. federal district courts in Florida, Texas, and Nevada. I don't think they're going to get anywhere because there's something called the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. You just can't go out and sue another country in U.S. federal court unless you can get around some exceptions, unless you can take advantage of some exceptions. Mm-hmm. There's also the International Court of Justice, but that won't work because China has to agree to jurisdiction, and of course it never would do so. But countries are in possession effectively of assets of China. For instance, China's holding more than $1 trillion worth of U.S. Treasury bills and notes. So we can take those just with the flick of a pen, and other countries can do the same thing. So there's a lot there that can be done. And I'm not saying that the U.S. should do this by itself. I don't think we should, because China would say that that was a repudiation of debt. They would slam us for being irresponsible custodians of the global financial system. But they would be able to say that if we took this action in conjunction with the issuers of other major currencies. So for instance, Ottawa, London, Brussels, Tokyo, if we did that in connection with them, then that's somewhat of an effective measure. Now, we can't confiscate enough of China's assets to compensate us for the economic damage that we've suffered. But nonetheless, we need to do something to deter China and other bad actors from doing something like this again. You know, we'll never get compensated for this. We've lost lives. You can't do anything about that. Even with the economic damage, you know, China doesn't have enough in terms of assets, but we do need to deter China. And one other thing, Patrick, and that is that what China's leaders did is a crime against humanity. If it isn't, then there is no such concept, and there is no such thing. So I think countries need to hold Xi Jinping and other senior Chinese leaders responsible. And if we can ever get our hands on them, we need the 21st century version of the Nuremberg trials.
And what does that look like? What could that look like?
That could look like what we saw with German leaders, with Japanese leaders after the Second World War. And no one, of course, wants to do this, but we've never seen a crime like this in history. No country has ever attacked every other country. And that's what China has done. It's hard for us to grasp the magnitude of what's occurred, but unfortunately, that's the conclusion that we have to face. And, you know, going forward for our children, forget ourselves, but for our children and for the rest of the world, we need to impose a cost on China so that no regime ever does this again.
There's a big difference between Germany and Japan versus China, because neither Germany nor Japan had 17% of world GDP at the time when we did that. You're talking about, you know what this almost reminds me of when you're going there? It's almost reminds me of the whole too big to fail type of situation, because on one end, if you do anything to them, how many economies are tied to China? Where China definitely knows that, because, you know, this is a game of leverage, and they know their level of leverage, because as much as we're talking about masks this and China this and China that, we're getting masks from them. We're relying on them on pharma. We're relying on them on a lot of different things.